and we can get this thing started. Let's see here. Hey, Aadip, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Are you there? Can you
Yeah,
hear me?
yeah,
Oh,
I'm here.
I don't
Yeah,
know what on earth that was. I'm sorry about that.
that's all right. It
All right.
happens.
Yeah, I can't quite see you. Would you
Yeah,
like me
no.
to send you a start video, mute audio, disable talking? Hmm.
I don't see an option for video. It's really strange. It looks different than last time, so.
Yeah, it does to me as well. I wonder if
Hmm.
there's a like if Zoom has done an update. Hmm.
All right, cool.
Okay, well, that mild technical adventure over. We are here. We are ready to go. Would you like to introduce yourself to everyone, sir, and then we can just dive right in.
Sure. Let's see. Well, my bio's on the website, so I don't need to go through that whole thing. But yeah, I'm Aadip Desai. I'm a writer, features and TV. I'm currently a screenwriting fellow at the AFI, and I am finishing up my first semester there. And I've worked in development, and I've been an assistant and a writer's assistant, and I've been on camera, and I've done a lot of crazy stuff. I've been a music supervisor, so I've kind of worked a lot of different jobs in the business. But my primary goal is to be a writer. So I'm here to help demystify the route to the writer's room. And full disclosure, I have not worked in a writer's room. I've worked with lots of people who've worked in writers' rooms. A lot of my friends are in writers' rooms. So this is one of those instances where it's like the teacher, is going to help you, me, I'm going to help you try to learn the different routes, but like beyond a certain, point, I may not be able to be very helpful. So, but I've been in like writers' rooms environments, and, I've been in punch-up rooms and a few things like that, but I've not been a staffed writer on a TV show. So just so you know. Yeah, so where do you want to start?
All right, cool. Well, let me see here. Da, da, da. Pull some things up. And go ahead and cue you up with some topics, if that's all right.
Yeah, and I have my list of things that we can cover. Let's see.
Da, 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 da. So let's see. I think one of the things that we were definitely going to talk about. Oh my gosh, technology. Oh, I don't know why it does not like me today.
And I'm
Um,
not seeing the chat box either. That usually is visible to me.
it's kind of on the you see this bottom panel with like your mute, stop video.
Yeah, I don't have any of that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I will just have to man the chat for you.
Okay, that's fine.
Hope that's cool. Do.
Oh, here we go. Let me show chat. Let me see if that pops up.
Okie dokie.
Yeah, we're just rocking, aren't we?
Yeah, I know. It's like right before the holidays.
Yeah.
Half of the country is under a blanket of snow.
Yeah.
It's just all going on. All right, cool. Well, man, why don't we go ahead and start, just in case there's anybody on here who's maybe unfamiliar with what a writer's room is. Well, maybe let's
Okay.
just define the term.
Okay, cool. So television shows are by and large written as a group, and at least to start. So every show, for the most part, has a writer's room. And so you'll have the showrunner, who's often the show creator, but not always. And they'll hire writers to come in and basically bang out these scripts, because you have to come up with anywhere between 6 scripts in a year or up to 23 if you're doing a network show like a comedy. So you need help, and so that's where we come in. That's why there's so many jobs, and each room is very different. So you can say a writer's room is this, but they're all very different in terms of the vibe of the room, what's required of everyone in the room. But for the most part, it's if you come in as a staff writer, which is the lowest level on a writing staff, you come in, you're there to support the other writers, and you're there to, pitch ideas. Don't pitch too much. Don't be in the way. Don't try to change the direction of the story. Like, you support. and keep a good attitude, and don't get too excited if something strange happens. Like, you just have to keep your shit together. It's very stressful. If you ask anyone who's a staff writer, when you're first starting, it's incredibly stressful. So there's another component that I'll talk about later, which is like self-care for writers, which is really important. But yeah, basically you'll get anywhere between, like you might have like only 2 writers in the room, or you might have 16 writers in the room. It just depends on how much money the show has for to staff up the writers room. Most of them seem to be between 6 and 12 people. And then once you're in the room, what happens is the beginning of the year, you break the story, and you break that as a room. So you're like, you have whiteboards, and you're like pitching like these storylines, potential storylines for characters. And then they'll usually hand off the let's say an episode to you, and you'll go like maybe write the outline, and then you'll come back and they'll approve it. The showrunner will approve it. The network has to approve outlines, and then it'll come back to you. Then you'll write a draft on it, then that gets approved, and then it'll come back to you to rewrite it, or the showrunner might rewrite you. So that's the long and short of it. Like, a writer's room is basically where you work, and it's full of snacks, and lunch is an important thing. So know what you want to eat for lunch. I think to make the poor writer's PA not have to, bug you about lunch is a nice thing to do. So there's like little tiny things you can make other people's lives easier, and they like you more. Just a random piece of advice.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, and they get stinky. I've heard they get stinky. I know that they get, so hygiene is really important.
Shower and deodorant, guys.
Yeah, huge. And mints.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so then the next, so I think most people understand that they've seen possibly, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and they've seen episodes, and like they're different shows about TV writing, but not a ton. But that gives you kind of a sense of, what that's like back in the day. Yeah.
All right, cool. So if somebody aspires to be in this stinky snack-filled room, writing.
Oh yeah, the hours are really long also. I forgot to mention. The hours can be very long. So a show, like a half-hour comedy, those can often run pretty long, like 12-hour days, maybe longer. Because you're just you're pitching jokes and jokes and jokes and jokes, and you sort of have to pitch a ton to get to the best joke that's going to stay, and you need several jokes per page. So those rooms can be really long. Drama rooms are a little different. Like, you'll break the story, get your outline, you can just like go home and write it, and go to your office, write it, and you don't have to come back too much. And so, but again, each one varies. So if you want to get in a room, there are several routes. You can be a writer's assistant, you can be a writer's PA, you can be a script coordinator. So those are kind of the jobs that get you in the room. And then once you're in the room and you kind of prove your mettle as one of those jobs, then they might say, hey, let's throw the writer's assistant in an episode, like a freelance, or let's throw the script coordinator a freelance. A lot of script coordinators get a freelance. They get 1 or 2 usually, but not all the time. And and then if you're there long enough and they like you, and like, let's say the current staff writer gets promoted, and then maybe you can move up from writer's assistant to staff writer. It's probably the most tried and true path into the room, if there is one. But it's no guarantee. So people become lifers sometimes at the writer's assistant level, like 3 years, 10 years stuck as writer's assistant, because they're almost too good and they don't want to lose them. So don't be a lifer. Try not to be a lifer if you can help it. So that's one route, and those jobs are really hard to get. They're as hard to get as getting a staff writing job. So, and you have to be in LA. That's it. I mean, if you want to write in television and you want to be staffed, you have to be in LA, unless it's a room in New York, and they don't have that many. But that's the truth of it. You just have to be here. Other ways in are, you can win a contest or win contests. You can get into one of the TV fellowship programs, the Disney ABC program, NBC Writers on the Verge, CBS, Fox had a program. I think they still have it. I'm not sure about Fox, but every single network seems to have a fellowship program. We have a list of LATV writers on our Facebook group. We have our humongous FAQ, and you can look in there, and it has everything listed out. So if you get in a fellowship program, most of them, their goal is to get you staffed. Um, that doesn't always happen, but that's their goal, because they want to be able to say, come to our fellowship, we'll get you staffed. So that's another way in. Usually 1,800 to 2,000 people apply for those fellowship programs, and then they take anywhere between 4 and 10 people or so. Another way in is have a hit play, off Broadway, like have a hit play, and that seems to get you into drama rooms. A lot of playwrights are in drama rooms because they have hit plays, and so they just learn how to write for television, but they have a very strong story sense and sense of dialogue. You can sell a feature, which is really, really hard, especially right now. People aren't really buying features. The market is tiny. All the work's in TV right now, by the way. And but if you sell a feature, or like maybe you wrote a feature, went to Sundance, that'll get you attention. Maybe that'll get you a meeting. It could certainly get you representation, which is another way in the room. If you have a manager or agent, their whole goal is to get you into a room. Another route is go to film school, network with your classmates who are producers and your professors, and just make a good impression on them with their writing and your attitude, and maybe they'll call you up and to come write on their show. You just never know. I go to AFI. Sam Ismail, like, he hires mostly AFI people for his shows. He doesn't have a ton of writers, but so you can use that network. So if you go to USC, use that network, and then you can take classes at the various places in town. So like Roadmap, Pilar Alessandra, Script Anatomy, Jen Grisanti stuff, Writer's Pad, UCLA Extension. Like, there's so many TV writing classes now. Those are great because you take a class, you meet your teacher who's a working writer, you impress them, then you have all these classmates with you who are at your level. Some are higher, some are lower, and those become your people that you create writing groups with, and you can create your own little writer's room when you have your writing group, and those are the people you're going to come up with. And so I have 2 writers groups. Both of them, everybody is crushing it so hard right now. I can't tell you what they're doing, but like, a lot of them have development deals. They've sold shows. They're in fellowship programs. They're on like Young and Hungry list. Like, everybody's blowing up right now, and it's taken a few years for everybody. So you have to also be patient. So those are the main ways into the room. It's really about getting enough attention that a showrunner, a network, a producer wants to bring you into a room. And then of course the way to get attention is to be able to write well. So you have to have a couple pilots that are really strong in the same genre or format. You can have like a 1-hour drama, and you can have a half-hour comedy, but when people are trying to pitch you, they're going to say, what are you? Because we don't know what kind of room you should be in, because there are comedy rooms and there are drama rooms. There are a few dramedy rooms, but that's like a whole other thing. But by and large, they're comedy and drama rooms. So if you need a 1-hour sample to get into a drama room, you need a half-hour sample to get into a comedy room.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have writers ask me a lot, how many samples in their genre should they have? I think we might have covered this in your last webinar, which was almost a year ago.
Yeah.
But just in case, if anyone missed that.
I hear different things. So here's another thing about advice. in this business. You'll get advice, and then a year later, that advice won't be valid anymore because the business changed. So part of being in this business is just being very flexible and like, well, I heard it was like this. Well, it's not like that anymore. So move on. Like, don't get too dug into the notion that like that's how the business is. Just know that it changes constantly. I mean, look, because of a lot of things happening in the business with mergers and like CEOs getting ousted for one reason or another, like there's regime change everywhere. So we all get caught up in that. But right now, you have to have two pilots in the same format. Some people will argue about that, but I think it cannot hurt you to have two. If you're a half-hour comedy writer, have two half-hour comedy pilots. If you want to write drama also, then make sure then you have your two drama pilots. Um, and then there's a lot of disagreement about whether you should have a spec or not. Um, and for those who don't know, a spec is basically your version of an episode of an existing television show. So, if you're a half-hour writer, like I'm writing a spec of Blackish, or I'm writing a Brooklyn Nine-Nine. If you're drama, you're like I'm writing a Killing Eve. So it's like fan fiction, basically. For those of you who don't know, it's like your fan fiction, and you should pick a show that you love. The advantages of having a really strong spec of an existing show are twofold. One, it helps you learn how to write better because you learn structure that way, and especially comedy, you can just like get the pacing. If you're able to write a spec, like then you can write a pilot, and then if you have a good idea, and then the other is some showrunners, like every once in a while, they'll be like, "Oh, send me a pilot and a spec," and I remember I was up for a job, and I didn't have like a really current spec, and I think it hurt me. I think it possibly kept me out of the room because I had a pilot, and then I had this old spec, and it just wasn't doing me any good. My bargaining.
Oh, I think you broke up a
Can you
little
hear
bit
me?
on that last
Oh,
bit.
okay. Sorry about that. Now my dogs are going crazy, so I just wanted to make sure you guys weren't hearing them. They're insane. So anyway, two pilots, and then I think everyone should have one spec in their genre just to have in their back pocket. And but I don't know what you guys have heard recently from all the managers and agents that you talk to. Like, what are they saying these days?
Yeah, I hear two samples is pretty.
Yeah,
I don't hear
yeah,
people talk about specs a whole lot outside of the
no,
fellowships, which I find
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, it's usually, I mean, I tell people if you're going to take the time to write something, write a pilot. But if you've never written a spec, I think it's really important that you do that as part of the learning curve. Because that's what the job is. Because it's like, okay, you wrote these great pilots and you get hired on staff on a show. And then they're like, okay, now you have to write in my voice. And you're like, oh, I've never done that. And you're going to not do a great job, probably. So I think it's better to be prepared and have that experience before you're in a room. A lot of this is like know how to do these things before you're in the room because now you're on the job and they can just say, yeah, Aadip, like you kind of suck this week, so we're not bringing you back next week. Because these jobs are, they can be week to week, they can be, 4 weeks, they can be 12 weeks. So um, anyway, but I also don't think that specs are the most fun to write always, and they can be very hard to write, especially if a show's been on for a really long time. But if you spec something, pick something that's currently on the air.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
All right. Cool. So let's say, in this hypothetical situation, you have your samples, you have, your spec experience, you're solid, you're ready to go. How does pitching, and then we talked a bit about branding, but how
yeah.
does pitching come into this?
Well, you're always pitching, so you're when you're meeting with a showrunner, you're meeting with a manager or an agent or an executive, um, or an assistant to someone, because a lot of times you can get the assistants to read you and they want to come up, so if they discover a hot writer, they can like kind of, you guys rise together. So you're constantly pitching your personal story, um, and then you're pitching your ideas, and so you're trying to get read. And um, with TV, it's funny because there's so many ways in it. There's no like one piece of advice for pitching, but I think pitching, it's always really important to not go on too long, no matter what you're pitching. People just go on and on and on, and I'm like falling asleep listening to that. Like, I don't need to hear like what their grandma had for breakfast in 1947. Like, that's not important to the story unless it's a major beat in your pilot. Like, don't pitch me that. And usually for TV, you're pitching, if you're trying to like sell a show, you're pitching the series and you're pitching like the whole idea. Like, okay, you can get 5 years of content out of this. But when you're pitching yourself to like a showrunner to get on a show, they've usually read you already. Not always, but they've usually read you if you got to that point. So they sort of know that you can write already, because if they didn't think you could write, you wouldn't be in that room, unless it was a favor, which those suck. Because you feel the favor of it, and so you're like, oh, I know, they're just like humoring me. But you use that opportunity to create a relationship with somebody, and then develop that. But in terms of pitching, try to stay within, a format when you're pitching yourself. Like, I'm a comedy writer and I write these kinds of things, and these are my, these are the themes that I gravitate toward. If you're in the room pitching, if you're trying to get on a show, like, know that show really well before you come in to pitch on it, or I mean, to meet on it. And like, know, whenever you're meeting with anybody, know their background. So know what shows they worked on. If it's an exec, if it's a producer, if it's a showrunner, like, know what they've worked on. And flattery does work. So like, but don't go too far with it. But like, be like, oh yeah, you worked on that episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where blah blah blah. And like, oh yeah, I wrote that one, and it's like, oh yeah, I really like that one, and this is why. And a lot of times when you're coming in to work on a show, you should have ideas about where you would take the show and which characters you connect with. And so there's a lot of preparation when you come in. Like, you want to have all that in your back pocket and just be prepared. But yeah, I don't know if that's a helpful answer, but there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much going into it. Be able to make small talk when you go on these meetings.
Oh goodness.
And
Yes.
that's why you have to do your research on who these people are, because if you come in and you didn't do your research and they're talking to you and you mention something that's like that they worked on, but they may not be proud of it, or if you clown on something that they worked on and you didn't know, like that can be a complete disaster. So part of the etiquette is just like, have as much information going in as you can. Yeah, I mean, that's basically pitching. Like, a lot of pitching at that level is pitching yourself to get into the room, and who knows how people get in or don't get in. There's so many reasons why you don't. Because I mean, I was up for a few shows this summer, and you get the emails like, yeah, they hired the showrunner's friend. That's it. Like, that's the best way to get into a room, is be the friend of a showrunner who's willing to like bring you in. Those are hard to get. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I hear people toss around like staffing and development, kind of like they're interchangeable. I don't imagine that's the case. That can't possibly be the case.
They are and they aren't. Like, you can, like, sometimes you'll talk to a writer who's at a higher level. Maybe they're like a producer or higher level. And one year you'll ask them like, oh, what, are you staffing this year? They're like, no, I'm developing this year. And what that means for them is they're creating shows and they're trying to sell shows, and they don't have time to be on a staff while they're doing that, because they might have like an overall deal or like a pod deal or some crazy deal. So they're going to like do that for a year, and then and sometimes like that doesn't work out. It's so hard to get a show on, even though there's so many buyers. It's still so hard that you could just not sell anything that year, and by the end of the year you're like, okay, I'm gonna try to staff again. That's higher level. I'm seeing more and more lower level writers who are developing. So they've been a staff writer, maybe they're executive story editor or story editor, and they're developing. And so the again, the rules are changing. So so I have friends who are staffed as producers, but then they're developing also. And so there's a lot going on. Um, I don't know if that answers the question, but like that's kind of what's up, and it's really hard to develop and write on a show at the same time. And I don't know if certain like shows have rules against you developing original material while you're working on a show. I don't know about that. I know some places are like that, so it's something to learn when you're on a show.
Read your contracts.
Read your yeah. Well, hopefully your manager or agent or lawyer has read the deal memos and the contracts, because they should know like the weird shit that's in there. And you should learn how these contracts work. That's another part of the gig. Because I've caught stuff on. I had a development deal on a reality show, and I got a deal memo, and I was like, this deal sucks. And I could tell, because when I read the contract, I could tell it was a lowball, and I could tell it was very unfavorable. And so like I took that to my lawyer with my notes, and they're like, yep, you found all the things that we're gonna now talk about. And then your lawyer takes you seriously, like, yeah, that guy knows what he's doing. That lady knows what she's doing. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. Win-win.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So earlier you had mentioned writer's assistant, writer's PA, script coordinator. Let's just maybe for anybody who doesn't know what those positions are and what those positions do, let's go ahead and kind of define them. I think we kind of did, and maybe I just missed it, so I might be redundant with this.
We did it I think we did it last time. So like we wrote up some stuff in our FAQ, and basically the writer's assistant is in the room with all the writers. They proofread grammar, punctuation, spelling. They suggest style, format changes. They do research. They check facts, dates. They manage all the drafts. They're keepers of the dialogue and the jokes. And they're typing in the room. They're just sitting there typing as people are talking. Often they'll like have the computer up projected on the screen, connected to the screen that everyone can see. So while you're typing, they're like looking at you typing terrible, and it's a very stressful job. So you're taking everything down. You're managing all the drafts. You're managing all dialogue. You're managing all those things. So it's a crazy job. I've never been a writer's assistant in a room. I've been a writer's assistant to like individual people, which is very different. But it's, once you do it a few times, you get the hang of it. I mean, either way, you have somebody watching you type, which is strange. So it's a writer's assistant. Writer's PA is a PA. So they're the PA for the writers. So they keep the office clean. They order lunch. They stock the fridge. They order like any fun swag that's coming through, birthday gifts for writers, crew gifts, filling in for writers' assistants if they're out. So it's a PA. It's a PA for the writers. And a script coordinator is responsible for archiving the various scripts, tracking script changes through drafts. Some rooms don't have script coordinators. They do a script coordinator writer's assistant hybrid thing, and that's a really hard job because you're just working all the time. Those guys, they format the scripts, they resolve any clearance issues, and then what they're really getting is like room experience, and then they're the ones who will often get thrown a freelance script, which is like, that's gold. And those are the three main ways to work in a room where you're not a writer. You're in support of a writer.
All right, awesome. I love it.
And those jobs, man, they work hard. You work really hard, long hours, because you're there usually before the writers get there, and you're there after the writers leave. And depending on how long that room goes, it could be a 16-hour day for you every day. So yeah, it's a tough gig.
Oh man, all the world to those guys.
But the great thing is, if you're a writer's assistant, you are now being tracked by agents. So you get on these lists now, and so everyone knows who you are, and they have all these different writers assistant meetups and all these things, and it's a really good way to move up fast. Again, not a guarantee, but you get a lot of visibility as a writer's assistant in particular.
All right, cool.
Yeah,
And you have to be in LA for all of these.
yeah, unless the room's in New York. Like Murphy Brown's in New York, for example. So if you're the writer's assistant on Murphy Brown, you're in New York. And but there's so few shows that are done in New York. Almost everything's here.
Yeah. Sorry, our non-LA people.
Yeah.
Sorry. Um, okay, cool. So we had talked about the fellowships. Do you
Yeah.
have any recommendations of contests that you find particularly good, reputable, not the,
Yeah.
hey, here's a Louisville Slugger as your prize. Congratulations, yay!
That's actually, that sounds better than most, I would say. Most of them, well, I've probably said it before. Contests are great for a few reasons. One is they give you a deadline to hit, which is how I use them. They're like, okay, I got to get my Blue Cat thing in, and I got to get my page and my Austin and Scriptapalooza and Final Draft and all that. And so I use those as like the okay, I'm gonna hit that deadline. That's my goal. So it's good for that. It's good if you get somewhere in them because it makes you feel better that you're not wasting your time or that you're not delusional. You're like, oh, I got a quarterfinalist in let's say Screencraft something, and you're like, okay, I'll keep going. I'll keep going. And then it makes the other aspiring people respect you more, which is a weird psychological thing. But it's like, oh yeah, she did, like, her script is doing well in 4 contests. Um, oh, she must know what she's doing. And then also, I got to work harder to be like her. So that's where contests come in. And then in the rare case, I think if you win a contest that's reputable, that potentially could get you some heat from representation. But a lot of agents have said, like, I don't care about contests. So I've heard it so many times. They're like, I don't care at all about contests. I care about your pilot and your pilots. And I don't really, like, if you did well in a contest, that's great, but that's not going to, like, swing it either way. Um, Unless you're like a nickel fellow or something, then if you're a fellow somewhere, that helps you. Like if you're a Disney fellow, if you're, a CBS writer, those kinds of things. But in terms of the contests that are good, I mean, I'll tell you the ones that we at LATV Writers that we talk about a lot. But it's like the tracking board Launchpad is really good. Like a lot of people have gotten heat off being on the top 10 of that list or even the top like 50. I like Final Draft Big Break's really good. Austin, of course, is really good. But you can look at, again, Blue Cat, Screencraft, Scriptapalooza, Script Pipeline, Slam Dance, and then Tracking B also has one. Those are the main. And then there's like We Screenplay has ones now. And I'm trying to think if there's any others. Those are the main ones. But like buyer beware, like they get expensive. It adds up. If your script is shit, like don't kill yourself applying to all the fellowships or to all the contests because you're just wasting your money. Like if you know your script is bad, just don't do it. Just save your money and work on your script. But if you don't care and you're just like, let's see what happens, then go for it. If you can afford it, it's fine. But remember, contests aren't like this panacea. It's not like this, okay, if I win page and now I'm gonna get a job on a show, and it's like, no, you're not. Like you might, but you're probably not.
Mm-hmm.
There's another option, which is the blacklist that you pay to get reads on that. And I know some people who've done well doing that. But again, they're incredible writers. Like you really have to bring it pretty hard. Um, that's the contest, and then fellowships are great because again, they're sponsored by the networks, and their whole job is to get you staff. They develop you, they introduce you to representation, and then they try to get you staff. So your CBS, your ABC, NBC, Nickelodeon, all those things. Sundance Episodic is really great. Humanitas is really cool. HBO is awesome. Like, so they're all really good. It's just they're all looking for different things, and there's also CAPE and NMHC, and there's so many, and we have them all listed in LAT Writers in our FAQ. So people are interested, and they're not all diversity programs too. So you just read the fine print, figure out if you fit what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like that should be a rule in general. Always read the fine print. Just like you should always read your
It seems
contract.
like it. It seems like it. Yeah, I think you have to.
Oh, alrighty, cool. All right, so we had chatted a bit about pitching and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about taking generals either with like an agent or a manager or showrunner meetings. Just sort of typical etiquette. Do you bring hard copies of your samples with you? I know some people do that.
Some people do that. I have them, but I don't like to leave things because to me, that's like, here you go, take my shit, and like just steal it. Like sometimes I'm like, I don't know what happens with this stuff. So some people don't do leave behinds. A lot of people don't. I used to, and I don't anymore. Like if they want it, then I'll say, oh, I can send it to you. Then I have the paper trail, and it's time stamped and everything. So I just prefer that personally. But it's all up to like the personal, like what that writer is willing to do. In those meetings, don't be desperate. They can smell it. Desperation smells terrible. It comes in with you, comes in before you in a way, or it's like if you're just like this puppy dog coming in, there's like, they're just too eager. It's part of this business, just like being cool. Yeah, I could take this or leave this, but you're passionate, but you're not attached to the outcome. I think that being attached to the outcome has gotten a lot of people in dire straits. Like they get, whoo! I just knocked all my scripts over. You can only see, like, this is the only clean part of my office right here. Like if I pan the camera, it's a disaster. And like when you're meeting with showrunners or executives or agents or managers, you just know your personal story. Be able to have 2 or 3 anecdotes about yourself that make you stand out, because they may only remember one thing about you, and so you have to stand out somehow. And I'm not saying bring a puppet, wear a Dr. Seuss hat or whatever. Like you come in, you're professional, your clothes are clean. You look like a writer, not like a producer, not like a director. You look like a writer, and you can talk about your personal history and make that appropriate to their show. So it's like they can see you in their room, just bringing everything from your life into their show, because that's ultimately what they want. Is like, do you have stories that we can mine to make writing this show easier and better? That's it. And manager, all those meetings are a little bit different. And they vary from manager to manager, agent to agent, showrunner to showrunner. Like sometimes a showrunner, like you come in, they're like, tell me about yourself. And you're like, okay. And then you go into your little spiel. And other times it's more of a conversation. And they're like, oh, where did you grow up? Oh, I grew up here. Oh, that's interesting. And you're like, oh, where did you grow up? And you're just kind of like on a first date, basically. It can feel that way. Yeah, I think that's mainly it. Be able to make the small talk, which is all that where did you grow up kind of stuff. And, again, if you know what they've worked on and the people they've worked with, and, then you have that in your back pocket when you start making the small talk. So, yeah. But
Nice.
like meetings are weird. Meetings are always weird.
Yeah.
I try to just have fun with it and I try to make a connection. I don't try to get the job. I try to make a connection because some of the people I've met with like executives, they don't want to hire me, but then they hire me for something else like a year later or 2 years later. And they're like, "Oh, we had this thing and we didn't know who to hire." And we're like, what's Aadip up to?" And then I'll get a phone call out of the blue. So you just never know where these things are going to go. So if you don't get hired on a show, but you meet with a showrunner and you represent yourself well, then I think that's a win. It's not the win, but it's a win.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's really good. That's great advice.
Yeah, because I mean, you get really nervous and you get really anxious and you're not desperate, but you start to feel like, oh my God, this might be my one shot. And if you're talented and you keep at it, I don't think it's going to be your one shot. And you just never know where these things are going to go.
Yeah. That's also true. And you never know where people end up.
That too, yeah, because they might want to hire you, but they can't because someone above them is like, no, my nephew is going to take that spot, or that kind of thing, or that spot's going to be taken by someone who's done a development program within the network, or someone who we optioned their pilot, but it's not going to go. But now they're in position to be in a room somewhere, so we have to hold a spot for them. Like, there's so many reasons why you won't get in a room that have nothing to do with your personality or your writing.
Mhm.
So you can't take it personally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's so very true.
yeah.
Huh. All right. Well, I think we've gotten to perhaps the biggest topic that we were going to discuss today, how to survive being in a room and
Okay,
how to survive trying to get into a room as well.
that's. I have friends who have told me that like trying to break in was the most stressful thing they've ever experienced in their life, and I think it's very stressful to have this like, oh, I hope I get in a room, I hope I can get on a show, I want to do this so badly, and like that can be soul crushing. And I think the thing to remember is keep asking yourself, do I still like doing this? And why am I doing this? Is there something I'd rather do? Because if there is, go do that. Um, because business is very hard and you have to constantly work. Like even once you break in, that's when the real work begins. It feels like when you're not in that you're working so hard, but once you're in, then now you have to work really hard to stay in. And that's tricky. And the advice that I've been given from lots of my friends who are all the way from like writers assistants all the way up to showrunners, they're like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to like, they're like, this is like a marathon every day for your brain. And so, breaking story is so taxing on your brain. So you have to make sure you're getting enough sleep, that you're exercising, that you're eating right. And like, I don't do these things necessarily, but like, that's what they tell you to do. I mean, I certainly try to get as much sleep as I can. I mean, I have a 9-month old and a 6-year old. So like, I haven't slept well in 6 years, but for normal people who don't have children who bother you constantly, um, get enough sleep, get exercise, stay hydrated, like, and then like if you need help, get help. Like if you need therapy or you need something like yoga or Pilates or whatever it is, like you have to take care of yourself because you're the instrument for all of this. And I see it like in graduate school. We're right now, like I was gonna talk about what I was writing because it's just kind of it'll tell you a little bit about what the workload can feel like. Like currently, I'm writing a short film, a TV spec, a feature, a comedy sketch, and I'm outlining 2 or 3 features. That's this week, and so on top of classes and having kids, like it's a lot of work. And like writing on a show is like that. It's just you're writing on one show, but you might be breaking an episode, you might be writing an outline of another episode, and you might be writing the draft of another episode all at the same time. So you have to take care of yourself. And so part of that also is like don't take things personally in the room, even if they feel personal. It's super hard. Like in my TV writing classes, like sometimes I'll hear something. And I'm like, was that some shade getting thrown at me? And like, what am I going to do about it? And you can get in your head, and then you start to lose focus, and then you're not in the game anymore. It's going to happen to everybody. It happens to everybody. But you have like try to stay present, stay calm, pitch, like if you're a staff writer, like pitch hard, but don't pitch too much. Again, like don't steer the story in the direction you want to go, because the showrunner is going to tell you what direction they're going in, and they're going to yes or no everything. When you're pitching jokes, the hardest joke wins, the best joke wins. So don't take it personally if you don't get a joke in. Like if you tell a joke and nobody laughs, that joke sucks. Move on. Emotionally move on. Intellectually move on. Try to help get a better joke in. And so like that's the room. Every room is different too. So like some rooms are really, really competitive, really, really stressful. People will try to undermine each other. But generally those environments everybody knows about. Like you sort of know that before you go into those rooms that you're going into one of those rooms. And you're making a choice. You may not have a choice, but that may be your only shot. Like, okay, I went out for staffing. That's the only offer I got. I guess I'm doing that. But no going in that job could last one day because the showrunner is insane or the lead actor of the show is unstable. You just don't know. I mean, like the Roseanne room is a great example. It's like people got their first break on that room and then it was over, in weeks. And so you just don't know in this business, your lead actor who the whole show is based around overdoses and dies, like your show's done, you just don't know what's going to happen. So part of being in the room is like staying very flexible and staying loose and calm and those kinds of things. But it's very hard. And try to find a mentor on this in your room who's willing to kind of take you under their wing. And when you're working on stuff, you kind of show it to them and like, should I pitch this kind of stuff? Like, what do you think about these ideas? And they might say, you know what, let me take the hit. Let me pitch them for you. And then I'll give you the credit for it if it goes. And if it doesn't go, I can take the hit because I'm at a higher level than you. But if you're a staff writer and you come in with some wacky idea and missing, then they're like, that person's terrible. Like, we should get rid of them. So there are little things like that, but find an ally in the room. For people of color, for women, LGBT people, I think it's really important to have a support network too, because sometimes you might be the only person that represents that in the room, and you need to have somebody you can talk to about like what you're dealing with. So it may not be someone in your room, but it could be someone on another show, and you can kind of commiserate and trade notes and stuff. So that's a lot of people don't talk about this, but I think it's really important to know these things, because I think like, oh my God, I'm gonna be a TV writer, and then it's like, oh my God, what's happening? Like everyone hates me and I'm terrible, and then all these things come through. All your insecurities come through. Yeah, so that's the room. I'm trying to think. What else? What else do you have?
That was my main list. So if it's cool, we can go to questions.
Yeah, we can go to questions if you have questions. I think.
Yeah.
Because I got through all my. Oh no, we should talk about networking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
sorry, writers. Pause. Question.
Networking is super important. So if you live in LA, then go to writers events. So go to the WGA, go to Nerdist, go to film school stuff, go to DGA, PGA stuff. Like go to everything that is TV writer related, or like showrunners. If showrunners are talking somewhere, like go to those things. Listen to podcasts. We have a list of like all the TV writing podcasts on our FAQ. Listen to podcasts. Follow people on Twitter. I follow like 50, 60 showrunners on Twitter. I engage with some of them. Twitter's a great place. It's a terrible place, but a great place for writers because you can show off your writing skills, but you can also network with people in, from the comfort of your own home or phone. And and part of the networking thing, I don't like the word networking, but I'm just going to use it. But it's really like relationship building. And so always go into a networking thing or a mixer going, this is a relationship building exercise. This is me finding my people. Like a lot of the people that I've met while networking have become my closest friends in LA. And we can't necessarily help each other get work, but we can help each other survive emotionally. So that's just as important. Because I have friends that I'm just like, I call them up and like, dude, what do I do? This is a crazy situation. They're like, all right, calm down. Like you can do this, talk about this, don't talk about that, and they can talk you down a little bit. So yeah, just go into these mixers like with, I have business cards. You don't need business cards, but I have them. And at least it shows that you put some effort into building your brand and into your professionalism. Um, and then other networking things you can do are like join different tracking boards. And then you can like meet other writers and you can meet executives through that. And that's a really good way to do it. But yeah, networking is a huge part of the whole entertainment business, the TV business in particular. It's a very social business. And so you got to go to places where like TV writers hang out, meet them. They go, oh, you're pretty cool. Like I could use help I'm developing a show. You want to come help me write that? Or, I need a writer's assistant or I need just a personal assistant. And then you can work for them and, read books for them to adapt and those kinds of things. So, use these opportunities to make real connections with people, not just fakey, like, oh, I have their phone number and that's it, and develop them. And that can get you, showrunner meetings. Like all my showrunner meetings have come out of my own like leveraging my own network, not from I'm not currently represented, but when I was represented, all my stuff came through my own hustle, not through my reps. And that you'll hear that constantly. A lot of people get their first job on their own on a show, even if they're represented.
All righty.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. All right. Now we're doing writer's questions.
Yeah, now we can do it.
Now we can do it. All right. So Christopher asks, you said dramedy was different. If you are interested in dramedy or just want to show you are flexible, would you write 2 dramedy pilots or have samples of both comedy and drama? How would you approach that? Thanks.
If you're doing, well, okay, you have to know if you're a half-hour dramedy writer or a 1-hour dramedy writer. So what I consider myself a comedy and a dramedy writer. So I have like the 2 pilots that I have right now that are doing okay. Like they're doing okay for me. One of them is a network half-hour single cam, and one of them is basically a cable streaming dramedy. And so when I send those samples, they can see range, but they know they're sort of in the same area. And I would say the important thing is that your voice is coming through in all your samples, not the format as much. But the format's important that like if you want to be a half-hour dramedy writer, then make sure your 2 pilots are half-hour samples. They don't both have to be dramedy samples because like how many dramedy samples can you have? But if they are both dramedy samples, the tricky part is then they're like, well, I don't know if they can come into a comedy room and have hard jokes. And I don't know if they can come into a drama room because they're only writing half-hour. So if you go all in on like I'm a half-hour dramedy person, you're hard to staff. Most dramedies that you see out there have attachments with major talent. There are very few dramedies that just come out of nowhere. And if you look at the list, it's like, oh, okay, Donald Glover, Aziz Ansari, it's Sarah Jessica Parker. It's like all these people. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, they're big name people. Shameless. You have John Wells, and you have Bill Macy, and so being a dramedy person is really, really tricky. Like, we could do a whole webinar on that, because there's so many things. Like, they're like, oh, we liked your dramedy, but we didn't like your comedy, and it's like, but you saw the dramedy, so can I staff on a dramedy? And they're like, well, I don't know. You just don't know. So if you're doing 1 hours, like you're shooting for like the Shameless type thing of the world, then I think you should have a 1 hour dramedy pilot, and you should have like a 1 hour another dramedy 1 hour, or a drama, so you can show like how deep you can go too. But this is just my opinion. Like, I don't. This is just one person's opinion. I think it's important to ask lots of people, but a lot of my friends and I are dramedy people, and we have this conversation. I'm like, what do we do with our samples? And like, eventually, once you break in, it doesn't matter as much, because I have friends who broke in on half-hour dramedies, and then they end up meeting on 1 hours and half hours once they have their credit, so there's that whole thing. I don't know if I answered the question, because it's a really tough one. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, Chris, if you want a little bit more clarification, type away.
Yeah. But really, like, just keep writing. Like, don't just have two things. I would hope that people would have more than two things. Because you have to keep, like, once everyone's read your stuff and they've passed on it, you have to have new stuff, in the pipeline. So
that is very true.
Yeah.
Okie dokie. Next question comes from Kevin. If you are meeting with someone on a comedy show, do you try and be funny, or do you try and show that you are professional and serious about the job?
If you come in, well, you have to be both. So you can be professional and funny at the same time. Like, this is not a stand-up show. I did stand-up, I did improv. This is not a stand-up gig, but it kind of is, because you come in, and that's where your personal story comes in, where it's like you're talking about yourself, because they're going to ask you to talk about yourself, and you got to pepper that story with jokes, and they can't feel like you wrote them, but we all know that you did. They know that you wrote them, you wrote them, but the way that you say them sounds organic in the room. And so I have like my go-to things. I repurpose them. I change them up based on who I'm talking to, based on how comfortable I feel with them. Because some people, I feel like, can't handle a certain joke, and others can't. Depends on how hard you're vibing. But if you're in a comedy interview, if you're interviewed to write on a comedy, you should be funny. And if you're not funny, they're not going to hire you. You can be funny on the page, but if you're not funny in person, I think that's strange to them. They're like, what? Like, you're not even a funny person. But don't be hammy, and don't like try to oversell the funny. Like, no one likes that. When they feel that you're selling them on a joke, nobody likes that. Yeah, be funny, but be careful. Because certain jokes, like, if you make the wrong joke in the wrong room, you're fucked. Like, you will insult that person. So if you get into any identity politics type of jokes, like, don't do it unless you know for a fact that you're on a show where you're going to be talking about that kind of stuff. If you come into a Blackish meeting, like, you better know about identity politics and about like really digging into issues of race and stuff. But if I came into the Goldbergs talking that way, that would make no sense at all, and you could just kill your shot. So yeah, know what room you're going into. It kind of goes back to that.
All right, cool. So Sue has an interesting question.
Okay.
When you write a spec script, is it a good idea to try to make it a bottle episode so as not to conflict with perceptions of the actual show at the moment? I think she means like standalone.
Standalone.
Like almost like a short film in the...
Yeah, this is a thing that comes up a lot. Some people say, yeah, write a bottle episode, because you kind of have to. Like, if a show is super, super serialized, it can be very hard to slip into that show and find like a spot. So then people will do bottle episodes. Um, this is the thing, like certain people hate them and certain people don't mind them. So it really all depends on like who's reading it. So I don't have any like hard and fast advice about it. Like we talk about this in school all the time, and the important thing is that you are capturing the voice of the show, and that you can connect that storyline to something in your life. So when they see it, they're like, only that person could have written that spec of that show, if that makes sense. So everything that I write has some personal connection to my background. And so when they see it, they're like, oh yeah, like I see you in this. And I think that's really important. So even though you're writing in the voice of the show, your personality and your voice is coming through. But in terms of like bottle, yeah, like so depends on what you're specking too. So, you know, some shows are really bodily and other shows don't do any bottle episodes. So um, I don't know. Like if there are examples of shows, maybe I could help, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's see. James found it. James has a question.
Okay.
What are some of the best ways to develop and maintain relationships with people working in the biz without seeming like a pest or keeping them from their work?
Um, that's assuming you've met somebody and you have their contact information. Um,
Often to keep communicating, I suppose.
yeah, I mean, you do the check in like every once in a while. Like some people check in, like they have like a calendar thing. They just check in, and that's really great. Like I'm not that good at that. But if you're having a conversation with somebody and like let's say you send something in, they're reading you, like I would not bother them more than every 2 weeks, because that can be annoying. And don't write really long emails. Right? Like
Yes.
I had a tendency, used to have the tendency to do that, and I've been broken of that because like I'll email a working TV writer and I'm like, hey man, how's it go? Like, hey so and so, how's it going? Da, 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 I'm working on this, and then they'll be like, that's cool, let's get a drink, and that's it. There's no hey deep, there's no like, there's nothing. It's just like because they're writing and they're busy, they don't have time to like write emails like these long conversations with you. So keep it brief, friendly. Update people when you have good news. I do that. Like, hey, I this thing's happening. Um, and oftentimes I'll be like, oh, that's really cool. Can I help you? Or let me know how it turns out. So it's really good to stay in contact with people. Just don't do it too much. Like I wouldn't do it more than, and it all depends on how your relationship is too. Early on, I wouldn't bug somebody a lot, but if you become friends and you can be like texting them and like, hey, um, I'm at the Standard and like, are you around? Like, you want to meet up? And they're like, yeah, cool, let's go do that. So as the relationship develops, then you get more into a shorthand.
Nice. That
Yeah.
is very true. Okie dokie. So, Chris asked, how are writing credits for shows? I missed a word there.
Mm.
How are writing credits determined for shows with writers' rooms? Thanks. It was like the critical word I didn't have.
Okay, so this is also tricky. If so, let's just use one example. So let's say the whole room is breaking the episode, and so the whole room is breaking the episode, and they go, okay, the showrunner is going to decide who gets the episode, or it's in your contract about like which episode you get. So this varies. They might paper team you, which means they take one writer and another writer in the room. They're like, go write that together, which is their way of saving money. It's not cool. Like paper teaming's not cool, but people do it. And then in terms of credits, like if you are the writer of that episode and they're like, you're the writer of that episode, you get credit for that. But the showrunner, if they rewrite you, or even if they don't, they can put their name on it. And you'll share credit with your showrunner, and that's a way for them to get money. It's frowned upon by a lot of showrunners, but some showrunners still do it because they're greedy, and or they just think, well, I rewrote the hell out of that script because. And I've heard this from showrunners who are like, yeah, the staff writer brought in the draft, and it was easier for me to rewrite it than to have them go back and rewrite it and then me give them notes again because we don't have time. And so the further along in the season, the more that's going to happen. Where it's like, we don't have time. We got to get in the can. We got to get in the can. So part of that is like, don't take that personally. Also, like you'll get your credit for your episode, but you might be sharing credit. And if it's weird and if it's like getting strange and like stressful or whatever, like you have to talk to your representation about what's going on. But like, don't blow up in the room. Don't like pull your showrunner aside and be like, hey, you're being a dick about this. And like, don't do it. Do not do it. Don't even show that you have an emotion about it. Like, talk to your reps, get advice, and then move forward from that if there's a credit issue. And real credit issues end up kind of at the WGA, but you just don't want to get into that stuff if you can help it. But the credit is like based on your contract or with the showrunner is like, okay, Karen, you get the next, episode. And that's like, all right, cool. I'm writing that episode. But know that everybody in the room has helped you, with it on some level, because you all broke it together. Someone else's jokes are in your episode. People be like, oh, I like that joke you wrote. And it's like, yeah, I didn't write that, but it's fine. I got the money. Like the check cleared. I got the credit. So that's the credit situation.
Oh man, that's hilarious. All right, cool. So Angela asks, do networks buy spec episodes from writers who are not in a room, i.e. some list buys 10 scripts from non-repped writers? I'm not entirely sure what that last part means.
Well, I don't understand the last part, but how do I put it? A lot of shows they're like required to do 1 or 2 freelance scripts a year. And usually those go to a script coordinator or a writer's assistant. People don't really buy specs because they can't read them legally. Because if, let's say I submit a spec to a show, I'm like, hey, read my, let's say it's my episode of Divorce that I wrote, I'm really proud of, and you just sent it in to the show, they can't even look at it. Because legally, if anything from that show ends up on the show, so you don't send in unsolicited material. So know that, like, I'm sure somebody has sold a spec somewhere. Like early in my career, I wrote a spec episode of a drama, and the production company got wind of it through an agency, and they were like, we want to buy this episode, like, which was unheard of at the time. It fell through for crazy reasons, but basically I almost did that. So I know that it can happen, but it was a complete fluke, and ultimately didn't go. So far I have no proof of it. So that should not be something that people are trying to do. Like, I'm going to write a Blackish and I'm going to sell it to ABC. Like, no, they're not going to look at it. There are other ways of that happening where someone's like, oh, you wrote a really cool pilot and we need to get a freelance, and they might come to you, and then you'll have your opportunity, to do that. And when you're staffing, and if the spec is part of your portfolio, you don't send the spec of that show to that show because they can't read it. So if you wrote a Goldbergs, you can't send that to the Goldbergs because they can't read it. So don't use it as a sample for that show because of legal reasons.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes all the sense. All right, cool. So a fair amount of the remaining questions are in relation to LATV Writers Facebook group, which you are in charge of. specifically, how do we join?
Oh, yeah, you just go to the LATV Writers Facebook group, and then you have to answer 2 questions, and then we'll approve you. It's pretty simple. Um, if you don't answer the questions, then we won't approve you. So we just want to like that's your entrance fee is tell us how you found out about us and what your intentions are. That's it. It's if you can't do that, then I don't know. Like maybe it's not the business for you.
Seems fairly straightforward.
It's pretty yeah. It's very low hanging fruit.
All right, cool. So
Yeah.
that was Jerry's question. Let me just do. Da, okie dokie. And then Christopher had also asked, what is the difference between developing and writing? I think we had touched on this. I don't know if he had missed it earlier, so maybe we can just recap it a
Like
bit.
staffing versus developing, or developing versus
It just says
writing?
developing versus writing.
I mean, development is you're working on the story to get it into a strong place, and that may be, you're. I mean, if we're just talking about writing itself, not like using business terminology, but like I'm developing this, it's like yeah, you're writing log lines and maybe a beat sheet, and maybe you're writing a treatment that you're working on, and like that's the development process, and then you'll start writing the script once you get that locked down. I don't know if that's answering that question specifically, um but in terms of like developing versus staffing, like in that paradigm, developing is like you're actively pitching networks and studios and production companies stuff that you have not necessarily written yet.
Mhm.
And then they're like, yeah, I want to do a deal with you on that to develop it, a development deal. And then you'll write the pilot, and the outline, and you write the pilot, and you work with whoever the buyer is,
Mhm.
and they try to get it to a network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So you had a sort of a brief follow-up question. Do you develop the scripts in the room, like the development of storylines for a season, or are you referring to developing your own projects apart from the show? It's in reference to something you said earlier, is in parentheses.
Well, you break the story in the room. You don't develop the story in the room. So that's the difference in terminology. Like if you're a working TV writer and you say I'm developing, that means that I'm taking the year off to write my own stuff and I'm not working on a show. And then if you're staffed, you're working on a show. And then in the room, you're breaking the story. I mean, it's the development of the story, but really, like, we call it breaking. And you're coming up with the storylines, and you're coming up with how these different characters interact, and what the arc of the season is, and how that relates to the arc of the whole show, and blah blah blah. So that's the difference.
All right, cool. I think that answered that. Okay, so here's a question I run into a lot, that Jonathan asked. How many pages are required for a half-hour and 1-hour shows? Like, accepted minimum, accepted maximum.
Yeah, this every day. You can hear professional writers will get into humongous arguments about this. It comes up all the time. If you're writing a pilot that's a half hour, like, don't go over like 33 pages. Like, you hear this number, everyone's up 32, 33 pages. Don't go under like 28, because then it looks like maybe you don't have enough story. This is just like me saying this based on just anecdotal information from like everybody that I've ever talked to. And then for a 1 hour, like, I wouldn't go below 55 pages, and I wouldn't go above 60 pages. I would try to stay in that sweet spot. But I mean, there's so much discussion about it. There's no hard and fast rule. Ultimately, write the page count that serves your story, but don't go over those numbers. You know, like you could have a streaming pilot that's 35, which I did for a while, and like I had multiple shorteners like, can you get 2 pages out of that? Can you cut 2 pages? And I'm like, yeah, I can cut 2 pages. Like, okay, yeah, do that. That'll help you. I'm like, okay. And I got it down to 32, which I felt really good about. Um, like a half-hour network comedy, like if it's at 29 pages, I think you're fine. And pilots run a little bit longer, so if you're getting 30, 31, I think it's fine. Um, but you cannot, like, no one can hold me to any of that because it could change, and it could also be personal preference. But
Yeah.
like some showrunners, like, I don't want to read anything over 32. You know, it's that kind of thing. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a pretty good rule of thumb.
yeah. It's like, and you know, when you're in writing groups and when you're getting notes, you know, like if your goal is like I'm trying to get 2 pages out of this, tell them that like I'm trying to trim, you know, help me find the cuts. And the way to do that is to get in later and leave earlier.
Mhm.
And any time you have like maybe you have a couplet of jokes that are there that like maybe you don't need because it's slowing the story down. It's a great joke, but like it's getting in the way of the story moving forward. You know, so there's lots of ways to do it.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, that was, oh, wait, hold on. I'm like, and that, oh, no, one has appeared.
Yeah.
One. Okay, so Jerry asks about format. I've seen various shows that use different formats. Um, Also double spaced and capitals for various aspects. I think he means all caps.
Oh, formatting, not format.
Oh, formatting.
Yeah, it must be formatting. Yeah,
Yeah.
because format's a different.
Yeah, I was like going, huh, I'm so confused what's happening.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yeah, formatting.
yeah, okay.
Um,
But what about the pilot format? Should it be just like standard, clean, nothing funky, or question mark? Which I think means some kind of like maybe, you do
don't.
some sort of stylized text or something like that.
I mean, my take, and like not everybody agrees with me, but like, don't be cute. Don't get cute with your formatting. Like, don't try to be like, hey, 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 I'm trying to subvert the thing because it's just going to get in the way of them reading your story if you're making them look through odd formatting. Like it's
Mhm.
not doing you any favors. Then once you've made it and you're like, I'm gonna put colors and I'm gonna have emojis in my shit, it's like, okay, go ahead. When you're like Sorkin could just give us wingdings and go, yeah, just buy it, and we'd be like, all right, cool. Well, you're not using Courier. You just don't mess with that. Like, and whatever you're like, let's just talk about pilots. If you're writing a pilot, find all the shows that are in the genre of your pilot. So if you're doing a family drama, or excuse me, a family comedy that's a network comedy, find all those shows that fall into that rubric and find them across like the different networks too. And just copy the formatting or like mix and match, but make sure it's always consistent. And for dramas, do that. And then if you're doing like a streaming thing, like look at like do they have act outs do they have act breaks in the formatting? Like that's the thing that people get in arguments about is like, do you have act breaks or not? And for streaming and some cable, you don't. Some streaming has act breaks in it, like Kimmy Schmidt's pilot, I think, had act breaks in it. Divorces, they didn't have act breaks. Um, so look at the formatting of shows that sold and just pick one or pick a couple and steal that, and then don't do anything cute. Don't bold anything. Don't all caps dialogue. If you need to emphasize, you can underline a piece of dialogue. You know, make sure that when we see a character for the first time, it's all caps. You know, like those things. You can underline your slug lines. You can not underline your slug lines. Like that's a personal choice. But make sure you always underline them or never underline them in your piece. You know, um, yeah, that's my advice about formatting. I'm a formatting nerd, so I have like multiple formatting books, and I
Oh,
get into conversations about formatting at the bar, and yeah, I just like it. Um,
oh, that's that's awesome.
but don't give people an excuse to put your script down because you formatted something weird in a weird way.
Mhm.
You know, that's not good.
Yeah, no, yeah, because I've heard it a lot where people will go, "Oh, I don't like how this looks," and just set it down. I'm sure you have as well.
Yeah, like I know as soon as I pick something up that this person is an amateur because they didn't pick Courier.
Hmm.
And like when I'm a story analyst, like I'm paid to read it no matter what. So like now you're making me read this entire screenplay in Times Roman. It's going to take me so long because I don't know if this is a minute per page or not. So like now when I'm giving you advice about where to put an act break or what, or like where these major story points are coming in, like I don't know. You know, you've screwed it up. So just don't do it.
All right, guys, you
Don't do
heard it here
funny
first.
don't do funny stuff. Like you know, have your writing style come through, and like the way that you describe things, that's your jam, and the way that your action is presented, like that's cool. And your dialogue obviously will show your writing voice, but yeah, getting cute with formatting is kind of a hacky thing.
All right, I love that. I'm gonna get that on a t-shirt. Don't be cute.
Don't be-
Um, all right, guys. Well, we'll do like one final call for questions.
Cool.
'Cause we've only got about 8 minutes left
Yeah.
before we have to let Aadip go and have a Sunday and be with his family and stuff like that.
Yeah. We're gonna go to Descanso Gardens and look at the lights.
Oh, that'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna come home and write all night.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, so we'll give it like another couple of seconds just in case anybody's
Yeah.
frantically going, no!
What about this?
Oh, but what about
I'm,
this?
I'm looking through my notes too and see if there's anything we didn't cover.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, here's one.
yeah,
In tangential to formatting, I suppose.
yeah.
Final draft is a must, yes or no?
Okay. I'm I am not paid by anybody to proselytize for any particular screenwriting software. Here's the thing, because this comes up every day. Like it's the industry standard. So whether you want to write in it or not, once you're working, you're most of the time you're going to be writing in Final Draft. So why mess around? Just get it and use it and get good at it. Writer duet's great. Like I have all of them. I have Movie Magic. I have Fade In. You know, you have all the John August stuff. I mean, I would say don't use that terrible program, Celtics or Celtics, whatever people call it. I hate that program so much because it's so hard to use, and it's just not a standard thing. But like, if you need free, that's okay. Free is fine, but like, just get Final Draft. Just do it. Like, don't. It's again, don't mess around. Like, it's just going to help you long term because once you're in a room and they're like, we're a Final Draft room, and you're like, oh no, I've been using this other thing for 2 years. Like you're gonna relearn how you write your screenplays, like the tool for your screenplays. And if you've done Final Draft, then if your room uses a different software, you'll be fine, you know. But that's my personal thing. Again, they don't pay me or anything. I've been using Final Draft forever. I've had writing partners who don't use Final Draft, so I had to get, Movie Magic to write with them. I had bosses who had a different thing, so I had to get that program. So I'm proficient in several of them, but most people don't need to do that. So just, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Like at graduate school, like we come in and they're like, we highly suggest getting Final Draft. And then the people who didn't, like week 2, they're like, why don't you have Final Draft? It's like, okay, yeah, get it.
All right, and let's see. Possibly the last one that we're going to have time for
Okay.
is from Miss Angela. And she says, what is your recommendation for a screenwriter's book? Or screenwriter's Bible, Save the Cat? I think
For screenwriting or for TV writing, I guess is the.
Yeah, I guess that would be the follow-up question. If you have a recommendation for one of each, then maybe let's go with that.
Yeah. Okay. Here's the thing. So people, people like to trash certain books, and I've known all like so many of the people who've written all the books. Like I train with like Snyder and stuff, and so it comes up all the time where people are like, "Oh yeah, Save the Cat sucks." Um, I think for TV writing, the book that I really like for people who are new to TV writing is Ellen Sandler's book. And it's the I just want to get the name of it right because I always forget it. But that's the book that I like. It's TV Writer's Cookbook. Um, and we have a list. We have a list on the FAQ for LA TV writers of like 15 books that are really good. Um, and you know, like Elephant Bucks by Sheldon Bowles, really good. Crafty TV Writing is really good. For dramas, I love Pam Douglas's book, writing the TV drama series. That book is the best. Like that. I mean, I read that. I wrote my spec. That got to, you know, CAA. That got to Dick Wolf. Like it was like one of those things because I didn't know anything at the time. So for dramas, that's great. For comedy, what do I like? There's a bunch of comedy books, but I like that. There's writing television sitcoms is good. Writing the pilot is really good. So yeah, I would check out our list of books and then for feature writing, I mean, I'm a huge Joseph Campbell fan, so I would read, you know, Hero with a Thousand Faces. I would read Save the Cat, but I would not be a slave to like page counts. And Blake told me like when we were hanging out before he passed away, like I never intended for anybody to like look at this as like you have to hit these numbers. He never intended that. So um, you don't have to become a slave to those numbers. And then for formatting, I really like Dave Trotier's book.
Mm.
Um, that's the book that I use most of the time. And yeah, I mean that I don't like to get into like suggesting too many like one book over another. I think it's like whatever the problem you're having with your writing, find the book that can help you tackle that problem
Mhm.
and go that way. But don't like most of the professional writers I know, they hate all those books. They just trash them constantly. So just know that going in. Like my professor's like they hate all the books. You know, I like some of the books. Like Chris Vogler's book, The Writer's Journey, is I love that book, and Darren Aronofsky loves that book for what it's worth. So those are the books.
All right.
Um,
Oh, I think
but
we're.
none of them are a silver bullet. Like you still have to do the writing.
Oh, that's true. All the books in the world can't write the script for you.
No, I mean, what's really important is screenplays. Reading great screenplays is humongous. That will teach you a lot of what you need to know. But also know that formatting has changed over the years. So, in terms of formatting, look at the most recent stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I love it. And that is just about
It?
our time. We
All
are
right, cool.
amazingly accurate with the
We did it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Aadip. This was
Yeah. I hope it was helpful.
yeah. All the right. I'm getting lots of various thanks and yay. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's always a good sign.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I will set you off to have your
Okay.
Sunday evening, and thank you
Yeah.
viewers, for joining us.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Happy holidays, everyone.
All
I will see you all in the next one.
right. Bye.
Bye, guys.